This conversation is part of our webinar series to discuss some of the critical issues addressed by the Global Landscape of Philanthropy, a publication that Wings launched in 2018, and you can find easily on our Knowledge Center. Our speakers for this webinar are Lauren Bradford, Peggy Saylor, and Deval Sanghavi, who are bringing all their experience to this session. Thank you very much to you all for being here, sharing your reflections and ideas on how to strengthen collaboration. Just a kind reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be published soon in YouTube and our social media channels. Also, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to drop your questions on the chat box. Welcome to you all, and I will let you with Lauren, who will be our moderator today.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm Lauren Bradford. I'm the Director of Global Partnerships at Candid, formerly Foundation Center. And for those of you who don't know, last month Foundation Center and GuideStar joined forces to become Candid, which is now perhaps the biggest philanthropy support organization in the world. So I look forward to hearing from you all in the future as to how Candid can best serve your organization. Now, today we're going to talk about why collaboration is important and how collaboration can be used as a way to address key challenges faced by philanthropy, like achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and financing the 2030 Development Agenda. So I'd also like to thank Peggy Saylor for joining us. She's the Executive Director of the Network of European Foundations, and Deval Sanghavi, who's the co-founder of Dasra. So we might just jump straight in, I think. Okay, so collaboration. These images on the screen represent many of the complex societal issues that local communities around the world care about and are affected by, such as poverty, inequality, strength of institutions, access to quality education, jobs, terrorism, war, affordable housing, civil rights, climate change, pollution, police brutality, discrimination, debt, population growth, gender equality, war on drugs, etc. These issues are also accounted for in the comprehensive global framework that is the SDGs. So what is a complex societal issue and how is it defined? Well, simply put, a complex societal issue is a dynamic problem embedded in a dynamic environment. Such problems often have some of the following characteristics: multiple actors. Various institutions own pieces of the problem, but no one is responsible for the whole picture. They're high cost. The problem is expensive to solve, and taxpayers and the community bear the high cost of responding to it, both financially and social cost. They're constantly changing, and the information is constantly changing. So the problem has moving parts, and new realities emerge all the time. Therefore, static solutions are inadequate. There is often a lack of urgency. The problem has persisted for so long that it feels normal. There is little incentive to approach it differently. Poor outcomes. Despite heavy spending, existing responses do little to solve the problem long term. And negative experience. Those affected by the problem and in need often have a difficult time navigating available resources. And of course, often they're political. And so for more information just on the idea of complex societal issue, I'd suggest you all take a look at the organization Community Solutions, who works to strengthen communities to end homelessness, which is a very complex problem. And they've learned a lot through their work on this. So how do we solve these complex societal issues? It's a pretty big question, and in a world that is not flat. So we solve them through collaboration, and we solve them through the 2030 SDG agenda, a framework that sets out to solve these exact complex societal issues. So several years ago, the Beethoven Foundation, based in Denmark, presented an event here at Candid that we hosted for European and US foundations working in the arts to come together to learn from each other and partner. And this was their take on collaboration. Philanthropic foundations are in a unique position with respect to creating change in cooperation with civil society and private and public players. They also have unique opportunities for acting on the basis of long-term thinking and a willingness to take risks. So why collaboration? Why should we collaborate? We have to collaborate. We need to collaborate to solve these complex societal issues and achieve the SDGs. Single individuals or organizations alone cannot fund or solve such challenging problems. We need to ensure that philanthropy plays its role within the broader development ecosystem. We need to make sure that organizations understand the work of their peers in order to take a strategic approach to funding and programming. As a sector, to ensure coordinated efforts to avoid duplication and mixed messaging, to share knowledge, ideas, and foster innovation across borders, to better understand philanthropy's collective contribution to effecting positive social change, to avoid competition and lift up philanthropy, to use resources smartly, both money and human capital for great impact, including making use of blended finance mechanisms with other partners, to leverage SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goals, and of course to act on the Addis Ababa Action Agenda to actually finance development and the achievement of these goals. And at the end of the day, because we actually all have the same end goal, we're in this work for the same reason, to make the world we live in a better place. So what does it take to collaborate? It takes a common goal. A common goal unites partners around something very specific that they want to achieve together and creates a sense that we are all in it together. A clearly articulated vision. It is hard enough collaborating, but if you do not have a clear and agreed upon vision, the work will simply fail. A value proposition. Why is this issue critical to solve, and what difference will it make to people and communities? How does it resonate, and how will you sell it to others to achieve collective buy-in and ownership? A shared agenda. All organizations will have their own agenda, and that is fine. It is identifying the elements of commonality between those agendas that is important. Ongoing engagement. Partners must engage with each other regularly. Partnerships take effort and need to be nourished. They involve human relationships at the end of the day. Trust. A partnership can never achieve its desired outcome if there is not trust between those partnering. You have to believe in the people you are partnering with. Do you trust them to make a decision? Time. Realistic timelines to achieve milestones have to be set while balancing urgency of problem solving with the ability to give partnerships the time to flourish. Strong relationships. Partnerships cannot work unless the relationships are strong. Everyone must remember they are in the partnership and collaborating for the same shared reason. You have the same end goal. Remember that. Defined roles and responsibilities. Each partner should be in the partnership for a specific purpose. What is that purpose? And therefore, what is the role of that organization? If this is not defined from the outset, competing agendas and that of self-promotion can often quickly take over. Leveraging different skills and expertise. The beauty of a partnership is you get to use the skills of another person or organization that you do not possess to enhance your own work. Identify these skills and use them. Equally, you can show off and leverage your own skills. Inclusivity and equality. A partnership must have equal buy-in from each stakeholder, otherwise you will quickly find yourself in a power struggle. Dynamism. Partnerships are a movable feast. No sooner are you progressing than something completely unexpected comes up. An organization has a change in leadership, a new partner wants to be involved, the political situation on the ground changes, a new law is passed affecting your work. For partnerships and collaboration to work, they have to be dynamic, adaptable, and evolving. Contextual relevance is key. Partners need to consider the local context, both for where their program is taking place and in which each partner is operating in. Ability for brand leverage. Something that is often not thought of in partnerships, but actually is very valuable, is the ability to highlight your own brand by association of those you are partnering with. So pick the right partners. Accountability. The thing about philanthropy is it doesn't have the same mechanisms in place as other sectors to hold it to account, so perhaps it comes less naturally. However, those collaborating simply must hold each other to account to ensure a positive outcome. And finally, collaboration needs to take place at multiple levels: global, regional, national, local. Partners and programs will often operate at multiple levels, and there needs to be connection between these levels. It is important that there is a funnel of knowledge and information sharing of latest developments between what is happening at the various levels and on specific issues and across the sector. So, collaboration, the reality. Challenging, yes. Necessary, yes. Worth it, absolutely. By focusing on building stronger national, regional, and global networks and partnerships, we will facilitate greater collaboration among philanthropic organizations, leading to more effective development outcomes, successfully solving complex societal issues, and financing the SDGs. Collaboration is no longer optional if a foundation or non-profit organization wants to work effectively and achieve its mission. And with that, I will hand over to Peggy to talk about how to foster collaboration in the philanthropy sector.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for this very strong call for collaboration. I'm very pleased to speak about the NEF experience and our perspective on collaborative trends. What we have seen is really in the last 5 years an impressive growth in terms of the collaborative we host at NEF. NEF, for those who don't know, is a network of European foundations. It's a platform which seeks to foster partnership, not only among European foundations, but across the sector, so with different players. And what we have seen is also the fact that the partnerships that we run are more and more strategic. So not only we see more foundation partnering, but in terms of depth and approach of the partnerships that we develop, we really see the development of strategic partnership and much more targeted pull from. So just to complement what Lauren was saying at the beginning, in Europe, we had a stronger driver also to partner for impact in terms of legislative impact level. And also I can give an example of a pool fund that was recently launched, which is called Civitates. It's the fresh partnership that we launched with 16 European foundations. And this partnership was really in reaction to the shrinking space that civil society was experiencing in Europe, and it was to react in terms of solidarity, and that foundation could do something jointly on this issue. So today, an infrastructure organization like us can bring to the partners, and secondly, try to give you some highlights about why a pool fund can be efficient and the challenges that they can face. So next, thank you very much. We see ourselves as a launching pad. We try to incubate pool fund. Our role is as a facilitator. We will help the people not only on the strategic alignment, which means that they will discuss and agree on the priorities of the pool fund, but also we facilitate the joint ways of taking the decision together. So we have already frames of governance that can be adapted to each partnership, and with that you win a lot of time when you want to start a collaboration. So I think the idea behind using a platform like us is really to be more efficient and to save time. So how do we support partnership? Key elements is really the identification of the right staff and providing them the structure. Then, like Lauren referred to, it's to avoid the power struggle that can be really one of the main problem during the development of a partnership, and we try to provide service of a neutral platform so that all the partners come with an equal footing. That's really, really important. Then we have a management expertise, and we try to come with our benchmark when partners discuss about evaluation, capacity development of the grantees, and we have created a toolkit, what we call the Funders Plus approach, that we try to bring and to streamline across the different initiatives. And of course, so that partner can really concentrate on the strategic level, we handle all the administrative and technical duties of the operation. So now the big question is about how efficient are the pool fund. And so that's the next slide. So I think the pool fund mechanism was very much used in emergency crisis, and they have proved to be very valuable for the grantees because they were providing a one-stop shop so that they can be in contact with several donors, but through a single mechanism. In terms of the different pool funds where we work, it's true that, for instance, on the sector for integration and migration of migrants in Europe, we know at the EPIM platform that is well established. And that means that all the European partners, the grantees, know that they can come through to us to seek funding. One of the critiques of the pool fund was to maybe not be able to reach the right organization and not to target the small organization. In our experience, it's not the case. That's something that we manage because we are able to fund really, really small organizations, and we try to go for those ones. And we also try to counterbalance the fact that sometimes pool funds are viewed as not building the capacity of the organization by having this funder plus approach that I was referring to. What is really, really essential is the fact that projects have to be designed really in a flexible manner so that they can be adapted depending on the evolution of the context. That's really, really the key. And for us, we always try to learn by doing and to adjust. So we need to be of course, to have a sense of direction and leadership, but to be able to change and not to have a very large amount of bureaucracy. And finally, I would say that what we are now reaching is this possibility or this capacity to have this holistic approach. I'm quoting again our program on migration and on integration, where we have 5 thematic funds on EU mobility and children on the move and detention, on integration. And with all that, we more or less cover all the field, and we are really able to complement the different thematic funds and to have a very good capacity to determine on the field. So we can go to the next slide, please, and we can see, well, of course, these are basic, also, let's say, advantages of the pool fund, the fact that it allows economies of scale and efficient transaction costs that will allow small partners to join in partnership where they could maybe not venture alone. An important element is the fact that also can be more risk taker. We have seen that people that really were shying away from some projects but joined because they thought, okay, we have more support. We are not going to be nominated alone, but we are backed by a full group. And again, I think one of the assumptions that say pool fund will be slow or experience is that we can really take off operation quickly. For Civitates, we could launch the call for proposal, the first call for proposal less than 1 year after the decision of creating the pool fund. So I think it's really the value of using mechanism like us to be much more quicker to be deployed on the ground. Challenges, finally, to conclude. I think across the board, what we have seen for our project is some difficulties in including the voices of the beneficiaries and to represent them better. That's something that we all try to think about and to address collectively, trying to also reflect across the board through all our concerns and to change ways of doing that. Communication and advocacy, that's something that was not obvious at the beginning, but we also try to be much more present in terms of advocacy. For instance, in the detention sector, we found a network that is called Alternative to Detention, and this network is managing, or at least is more and more listen at the European level, at least has more a voice in the policy fora, and they also manage to influence the way the EU was going to fund alternative to detention. So we are trying. It's not easy. It's really a moment in time also on detention. As you know, it's the governments are having a much stricter position, but yet we are trying to work on that. And then finally, the last challenge will be around the fact that, and that is to open the discussion with Deval. It's about the fact that we should also collaborate with other partners, and that's not always easy. Private sector and academic and other governmental actors, to name a few. But definitely, we seek to engage with these partners, but it's not always obvious. Thank you.
Deval, to talk a little bit about the opportunities to collaborate with other sectors.
Great. Yes. Thank you, guys. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. And so, I mean, clearly, I think, the last two presentations spoke a lot about the need to collaborate and the ability to then create much greater sort of return on investment and achieve some of these big, hairy, audacious goals like the SDGs. And so from a Dasra perspective, I guess about a decade ago, we started bringing funders together to collaborate and help scale different organizations. But what we realized was with some of the issues against, especially when you have an SDG lens or something as big as ending hunger in India, you need to bring other actors together. And so we moved from the sort of bringing together donors, creating that platform, having everyone aligned to goals and scaling different organizations, enabling them to create greater impact, to say, how do we actually look at the field as a whole? And in doing so, really create a more collaborative environment for multiple stakeholders to, number one, take more responsibility for the issue at hand, but more, number two, I guess, bring in different perspectives, skills, similar to what you would do with funders, but ideally, create greater leverage when you have corporate sector, government, academia, media, NGOs, philanthropists, funders, multilaterals, et cetera, coming together. And so I think for us, where we started out was very similar, I guess, to when we started bringing funders together, where one needs to actually start with evidence and data. And we've seen that if one can provide a significant amount of evidence, data, and access to networks that currently exist, or even creating networks of different entities in a particular field, there's a higher probability of newcomers coming on board, regardless of which stakeholder group they support or are from, to actually want to collaborate, because very quickly you've demonstrated the value proposition is not just providing evidence they may not have access to, but I think more importantly, demonstrating how these different perspectives are required to actually solve, again, that big, hairy, audacious problem. And so that's what we've seen is really providing a space or an equal level playing field where more people want to come in, given that they see, number one, the problem is so huge, but number two, that there is a role for these different stakeholders to sort of play. So in addition to providing evidence on the ground to say sort of, this is the problem and this is how big it is, I think providing sort of a gateway for academics to come in on M&E, impact assessment, and validation of certain targets. The nonprofits, of course, coming in on at the different innovative solutions that are being implemented, as well as social businesses. The corporate sector, I think, coming on and bringing some of their skills to the table. And so we were able to, and have been, I guess, able to sort of carve out roles for different stakeholders within the field, which has enabled, I guess, us to create a more collaborative environment, which brings multi-stakeholders together. I think for the genuine partnership to really occur, from these groups, I think there is a lot of unlearning that needs to happen. And that unlearning cannot happen in conference rooms or in sort of foundation offices. It really has to happen on the ground and in the field. So we've seen, I guess, two things happen with that. Number one, when you're actually, in front of communities that we're trying to serve and impact, I think it makes it very real. And a lot of the preconceived notions we may have by being part of sort of different stakeholder groups very quickly goes away when you see the need in front of you. You realize the community themselves are the ones who are trying to single-handedly lift themselves out of poverty or alleviate the various burdens that they have. And I guess that emotional sort of period is critical for a lot of people to start unlearning what they have and really put the beneficiary, the client, the community at the forefront of the conversation and saying we have skills and perspectives that we may bring to the table that are inherent to us, but it's also really important to listen and learn from the community in front of us, and really they're the drivers of this collaborative, not the other way around. And so we've seen sort of that immersive field visits, the constant sort of reminding them of what's going on in the field and creating that exposure and taking that group out to the field, I think is critical, because you're also able to, as a convener or a field builder at Dasra at least, we're able to then sense how people are reacting, sort of create a safe space for us to have conversations of trust and really buy-in of why we're here in the first place, which is, again, solving that problem and creating impact on the ground. And then when we go back to our offices, we keep that in the forefront versus perhaps what we currently have seen as our value add to that problem. I think from a successful collaboration perspective, after you bring these stakeholders together, I guess what we've seen is that constant sort of feedback loop with the community, with the NGO leaders, with the different stakeholders, and really bringing everyone onto that same table and having frequent conversations with these groups individually as well as collectively to ensure that that bond remains throughout this period. And so one of the examples we've seen, for example, in the Dasra Adolescents Collaborative, when we were focusing on 10 to 19 age group, having the government, the NGOs, and the donors coming together has been critical in some of these key decisions that are made. For example, which state to expand to, what does the M&E or impact assessment baseline look like, and hearing from government officials on what are some of the policies that they currently have for adolescents, and more importantly, where they are seeing some of the gaps that these other stakeholders from civil society or the private sector can fill. And so I think having sort of that open conversation in the 10 to 19 space has opened a significant amount of trust with the government to not just identify areas or issues that currently exist in their own programs, which is hard for any government, I think, to do, but more so to then see that there's solutions in front of them, or they could even co-create those solutions with some of these partners in this collaborative. And so we've seen that as a really successful sort of turn of events, at least in our work with adolescents, as well as our work in urban sanitation, where we brought a group of organizations together, private sector, NGOs, civil society, philanthropists, foundations, and we came together to actually figure out if we can provide sort of an advocacy and training to the government officials focusing on urban sanitation to start including fecal sludge management in the urban sanitation policy in the country. And it was a concerted effort of being on committees, interacting with government, demonstrating on the ground what was happening, which has allowed policies to be passed, not at a central government level, but in 19 different states now, and accessed up to $3 billion worth of funding, which was in the government budget in sanitation, but now can be accessed by players in sort of the fecal sludge management ecosystem. And so it is very much an iterative process, a very open and transparent process, but I think spending time in building that trust is critical in any of these relationships.
Great, thank you, Deval. I think we can go to Q&A now. thank you to all of our speakers. We've got some great questions here. I'm going to go to the first question, which is to all panelists. In terms of human and financial resources, how expensive is collaboration? How can you say that a collaboration was successful or not? And do you know of particular frameworks to evaluate collaboration efforts? So that's the first question. That's a pretty big question, so we'll start there. Deval or Peggy, would you like to share some thoughts on that?
Peggy, would you like to start?
You can start, Deval. Thank you.
Sure, and so at least one of the things we've seen, and I think this is critical at least for multi-stakeholder collaboratives, the specific question, Lauren, you asked about success and how do you ensure that it's cost effective. At least from the Indian context, I think it becomes cost effective when you are including and partnering with government. And I say that because clearly in any sector and in any country, they are the ones who have the greatest access to funds. They also are limited due to election cycles on the amount of innovation and risk that they can take to solve certain issues. And so I think providing sort of them onto the table from day one to understand what they feel the problems are, in addition to, of course, the community, and bringing that group together, and then over time, really mainstreaming this within the government system. I think you see a huge uptick in terms of the leverage effect you have in creating sort of this collaborative and then very much making sure it's influencing, you know, at a state or even a national level, policies like I said, on national fecal sludge management, where literally within a year, just by a simple clause put into the urban sanitation policy, you're able to access $3 billion worth of government funding that's already been approved for this as it relates to urban sanitation. And so I think it's seeing those linkages early, bringing government in from the beginning, and really creating a more participatory approach versus sort of antagonizing the government for faults that they may have in their policies.
Great, thanks, Deval. And Peggy, did you want to add anything else?
Yes, I think when I spoke, I gave the example of EPIM in terms of, you know, managing to put some funding that was not present on alternative to detention, or try to press the European institution and national.
Sorry, Peggy, but we're not hearing you very well, so sorry to interrupt you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Okay. I think to complement what Deval was saying, for us, what will be a success also is to put some issues on the agenda and try to complement what the discussion is at the European level by bringing some new insight on the issue. For instance, on the question on digitalization, we are supporting in the Civitates partnership some organizations to work more on the transparency and on the also accountability of the platforms on the digitalization on the public sphere, and that's something that is also on the agenda of the government in Europe. But maybe they will not be able to fund the same kind of organization and research as we do, because we are able to support some costs that they are not. So I think all this capacity of funding, you know, diverse research is really critical and can really make a difference in comparison to their ability of working. But that could be also the way we can measure our success.
Okay, and perhaps I'll just add one more point to answering this question, which particularly around how to say collaboration was successful or not. I think a theory of change is crucial for all of those in the group, in the collaboration, the partners, and a theory of change that touches on input, activities, outputs, outcomes, impact, and actually suggest the indicators that will be used to measure, and they're going to need to vary obviously based on project and what the actual method is for collecting that data and the frequency. So hopefully that's answered that first big question for everyone. And then we have another question here. If data is key to fostering collaboration, what kind of data should philanthropic organizations collect to show their impact and gain attention from other sectors? A great question. Peggy, Deval, who would like to start?
The reference to the theory of change is really important. I mean, that's something that's a tool with which we work now in all our partnerships. So that's really important. And because in most of our partnerships we have this connecting and advocacy element, that's something that we try to measure. Yeah, well, it's really dependent on each program that we could really say that we have decided on which indicators on which we decided to work. So it's difficult to reply to this question giving a single answer. But what we try to because of the difficulty of measuring advocacy also. But at least, I mean, through the grantee work, we always try to illustrate what we are doing, and there are policy wins that we do when it refers to policy that we try to capture. And I think one very important element, and that's where we can refer to the 4C, is the capacity development of the organization, and that's something that we are now trying to formalize. With external expertise for this program on integration and migration that has been ongoing for more than 10 years. And we really are going to look at the different organizations that was followed during all this time to see how we could support their capacity in terms of networking with the institution, in terms of internal strengthening and this kind of organization.
All right, and Deval, did you want to add anything to this question?
Yeah, no, and I think when we talked about effectiveness and efficiency, at least earlier in the conversation, I think it's critical also that the M&E frameworks that are designed, I think at one level, the fact that it is being shared amongst a group of organizations, I think is highly beneficial, and that does decrease cost. So instead of having 10 NGOs, each individually coming up with their metrics, with their data, with their technology systems, and then some of them being sort of accredited by universities, and then only a few of that entire sort of data series being adopted from the government, I think sort of setting the tone, of course, using theory of change, et cetera, from the beginning. But more importantly, I think then having a unified and independent M&E or impact assessment sort of provider, I think, is critical. And so you're reducing transaction costs, you're creating the same platform. And so again, the work we're, for example, doing in adolescence, while we are focusing on comprehensive programming. So we have some NGOs that are focused on education, some NGOs that are focused on health, some that are focusing on community mobilization, some on livelihoods. The outcomes that they are reporting on are the exact same outcomes, which again relate they're very aligned to where the government is seeing their development goals going forward. And so I think we were able to bring in a very experienced monitoring and evaluation and impact assessment organization to do this, which none of these organizations individually, the nonprofits, would be able to afford on their own. But more importantly, we're not only rolled it out to the groups that we're directly working with and building the capacity in a particular state, but we've rolled that same sort of platform out and open sourcing it to 70 other organizations across the entire country that focuses on adolescents. And that's been seen as a benefit to the government as well, because they're seeing, again, one data set from multiple players coming through, which makes their life a little easier, given the complexities in managing data and the differences people may have in defining that. And I think number two, we've clearly decreased, again, the transaction cost of each of these organizations trying to do it on their own.
I think there are really good points, both of you, and I'll just sort of build on both of Peggy and Deval's comments, which is to remind everyone of the SDG framework and its set of targets and indicators, and that was designed to help people have a similar sort of framework to therefore understand each other and to therefore sort of signal to each other they're working on to achieve these goals and sort of gain attention in that sense. So the SDGs are at a higher level for sure, and many actors are still figuring out how to take the SDGs, the targets and indicators, and apply them at a local level. But there certainly is progress on that, and I've seen a couple of foundations who have actually taken the goals, the targets and the indicators and then adapted them to their own local context and asked their grantees to use those similar indicators. So I think it's just a good reminder that the SDGs are sort of another version of doing this in which there's already buy-in. And I think Benjamin from Wings has a question next.
Thank you, Laura, and sorry to jump in. I allow it to myself because I'm at the control here on the platform. Thank you. No, actually, I just wanted to well, first to thank you for all these really interesting insights on this important topic of collaboration. Well, one very brief remark, I think, on the impact question. How do you assess the impact of collaboration, not the impact of just the money that is there and what it's achieving? Because collaboration is not just about pooling money; it's really what's going to come on top of this in terms of cross-fertilizing expertises, joining also respective networks of funders and partners around the table. So and this implies a really different approach to evaluation and looking at a very qualitative dimension of this impact and trying to really understand what those different perspectives, networks, and non-financial resources pooled have really brought to the table, and I'm personally convinced that it adds a lot, and I've experienced it, including with the network of European foundations in the past. That really having those different funders at the table, each one coming with its experience, its perspective, and adding that to the pool, and really helping to design some innovative mechanisms to address complex causes. So I think that's really an important element, and I agree that we need to be better at understanding this added value of collaboration if we want to make the case for collaboration. And that leads actually to my question, is that despite the fact that we're seeing a trend and a growing interest in collaborating within philanthropy and between philanthropy and other actors, if we look at the Harvard research from last year on global philanthropy, it found out that I think 60% of foundations out of the 360,000 they found in their research, 60% are not collaborating. So that really raises some questions, and those questions are: what does it take to really move our field, shake up our field, and have more collaboration running? I think the examples you provide give an element of answer, in that first you need an infrastructure for that. You need philanthropic support organizations like NEF, like Dasra, to host funds, to convene actors within the field and across the broader ecosystem. Well, there's first, like, how do we build a stronger infrastructure to make this collaboration happen? But maybe also, and that's also a question for our panelists, how could we raise the awareness of the philanthropic sector on the importance of collaboration, maybe beyond the general nice idea that it's good to collaborate, and coming maybe with data, coming with evidence that this collaboration is really going to achieve greater impact. So how could we do that? And so double question to all of you: how can we build a stronger infrastructure for collaboration to happen, and how can we create more awareness among the philanthropic community to see more collaboration happening effectively?
Great question. Thank you, Benjamin. Well, maybe I'll really quickly jump in and then go to our fellow speakers. But I think part of the answer to the question, and this is quite high level, but is philanthropy says that it's a risk taker. So let's push philanthropy to take risks and actually join in some collaborations where it may not usually participate, join in some pooled funds, and use those as learnings to then actually highlight what philanthropy has been doing. I mean, pooled funds is a great example where we see, the big players such as Gates, for example, funding alongside government or multilateral system, but I'm not sure how many examples of that there actually are out there. And I think until we have a little more risk-taking and a few more examples, it's a little bit hard to have the case studies to share. So it's just sort of a high-level response to that question. Peggy and Deval, it'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I think we've seen is, and this holds true with NGOs as well, and philanthropists, is that they're not setting high enough ambitions, and so the sort of the desire to give is usually because of something that they've seen around them, and they're successful in solving some of those issues, but they don't necessarily have the larger dreams to say, if I've solved it for this community, how do I look at a district, a city, a state, or the country? And so one of the things I guess we've been doing at Dasra is both with NGOs as well as with givers is to really help them gain confidence in themselves, that they can actually be part of something that's much larger than just their intervention, whether it's capital or the interventions that these NGOs are operating on the ground, and that takes time. That takes behavioral change. It is a little bit of different sciences coming together to help them believe in themselves and believe that they can actually solve certain problems that are much bigger than they originally set out to do when they put their foundation together. But I think once you're able to do that, and that target or that goal is so large, then collaborations is the only way forward. And I think we've seen sort of leading, I guess, with the heart and saying you can do more, and you've done great so far, but what the country needs and the world needs you to do is much greater than what you've accomplished. I think that's the starting conversation for then people to actually then realize that if the goal is much larger, it has to be done in a collaborative manner. And I think that emotional side and that journey, that donor journey that needs to take place, or even NGO journey for that matter, I don't think is honestly based on data, evidence, cost effectiveness. A lot of the things we speak about, it's based really on a really personal sort of belief or lack thereof that I individually or my intervention can solve something at scale. And so I think it's getting to that nitty-gritty is critical. And of course, bringing peers along with them who have solved something at scale to give them that confidence, I think is something that we see at least as the first step.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Deval. Peggy?
To me, what is really important, and I was referring to that when I was introducing the topic, is really our capacity to communicate what we've been doing. And I think for that, we need time in most of the partnership, because it's not in the first 2, 3, 4 years that we will really see results. It really takes time to establish network. I see for the European Fund for the Balkans, which is also one of the pool funds that we have established, it's now a very well-known platform. They are able to influence policy. They are part of the discussion with regard to the future of the Balkans, and this can only happen after 10 years of establishment of the expertise. So I think we need to be patient. We need to be really conform to our mission, which is a long-term perspective. And then when we have reached this level where we can really reap and see the fruits of what we have been doing, then connect better to be able to present the result. And that's something that, as for many organizations, we are not so good at doing. So I mean, we have to strengthen ourselves in connecting better, I think, and that's something that is really crucial. And the second element is our capacity, at least in Europe, to be really close to government. Benjamin, you will remember when we were invited by the European institution to discuss and to see how we could co-fund. And then when we really go into the details, then we stop very quickly the conversation because we are always saying, okay, they reproach to us not to be transparent, and we reproach to them not to be able to target the people that we really want to help. So I think we need to go beyond this impossibility of working together, because we are missing opportunities.
Yeah, we are missing opportunities indeed. Going back to Deval's point of community being drivers, we've got a follow-up question there, which is, how are foundations empowering these communities in need of change to become more sustainable?
Yeah, no, and I think, I guess when we say again, how are these foundations doing so, I think it's critical to find organizations, NGOs on the ground that are, you know, staffed by people from the community, that have frequent feedback loops from the community as well. And I think that's a critical piece to deciding, you know, who to fund. And I think, unfortunately, especially if we look at global foundations that operate in India, many of them are importing solutions from outside the country, which may not work. And I think, more importantly, it takes a lot longer buy-in period for the community themselves. And so I do think it's about funding local organizations, ensuring that they have the community voice from day one. And about 80 sort of research reports that Dasra has on different sectors online, really the goal of these research reports were and still are to get the community voice as it's heard through these NGOs, i.e. these are the interventions that are working, these are the communities that have benefited them, and really shine a spotlight on these tried and tested interventions in the field to allow foundations to, of course, care about their specific sector focus area, but then to trust that the NGOs and the communities that are guiding them have the solutions and not the other way around. And I think there's a huge trust deficit, unfortunately, and power imbalance, of course, that occurs where foundations not only want to decide the sector, which is clear, but more importantly, want to decide the interventions. And I think that's when it gets sticky. And in the for-profit world, it's very clear you let customers decide your product, and in the nonprofit world, for whatever reason, that's not even thought about as the norm.
That's a great point. Thank you, Deval. What is it? The customer is always right. And I couldn't agree more with those points. We've just got one last question here that we're going to go to quickly before we sum up, and it's building on this local organization point, which I'm really excited about. So how do you deal with the challenge of local organizations not willing to take ownership and especially accepting to collaborate with other organizations? So that's probably a good one for you, Deval. I mean, Peggy, feel free to jump in too, but it's, if we are struggling with these local organizations not sort of collaborating or taking ownership, and that's what we really want, then how do we make that happen?
Yeah, I guess our approach, I mean, we've been running leadership programs for organizations now for over a decade. And the reason we focus on leadership is because it stretches across sectors. And so you have 50 or 60 partners coming together 1 week every quarter, focusing on leadership issues, which they all can relate to, regardless of the sector that they're in. But in that period, they actually start breaking down their own inherent barriers that they have with each other. Trust is being formed. And many of them say it's like going back to college again. And the friends they make through these leadership programs are ones that they want to start collaborating with. with. And so I think the issue is many times donors bring a group of organizations in the same sector in a room and say, now you have to work together, versus organically having these relationships being set up, not with the basis of collaboration, but on another sort of impact or platform. And then you see, I guess, much more collaboration forming because that trust is inherently built. And so I think that's one area. I think another area is, and again, it's not that every NGO needs to, in the education space, for example, needs to implement the same solution, but there could be one or two things that all of these education organizations agree upon. And so it's taking that time and effort to find out what that is. Usually it is something around either behavioral change in the community, changing the narrative, for example, that one organization can't do on their own, or working in a collaboration with the government, more on the advocacy side of things. So I think it's one of those things that groups can come together and collaborate and not necessarily feel threatened of their own intervention or model being diluted in that process.
Great. Peggy, did you want to add to that, or should we sum up?
You can sum up. That's very good.
Okay, thank you. So this has been a very rich conversation, and I actually don't really know where to start with the summing up. But I hope it's been helpful to all of you on the call. I'll just give you sort of a few key takeaways or reflections that really stand out. One is that projects need to be designed so that they are flexible, and I take that one step further and say the interesting balance in collaborating is that in a way you do kind of need to build the plane and fly it at the same time. So, and know that it's okay to do that sometimes, assuming you have the right processes in place around that. And then I think a key point around partnering and collaborating is knowing that there is an end point, and that as progress is made, partnerships and collaboration do change, and they'll have different goals as they go along as well, and that's okay. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think unlearning was a really great term, so thank you for putting that out there, Deval. I really appreciated that. And then listening and learning from the community and focusing on local organizations as the drivers for collaboration is obviously crucial. I think not setting high enough ambitions is a call to action for all of us. Let's really think big here and act on that. And finally, we have the SDGs as a framework to help us think through how to deal with these issues at a high level that can be applied at a local level as well. So please keep all of those points in mind, and I think this has been recorded, so we'll be able to re-listen to it, and I will certainly be re-listening to it because I've learned a lot. So thank you so much to Deval and Peggy, and I just want to say that Wings has another webinar on May 7th, this time on power issues, so hopefully you can all join to that. So with that, I think we'll end it unless Nadia has anything else that she would like to add.
So thank you, Lauren, Deval, and Peggy for being with us today. And thank you very much to you all, and I hope to see you again on one of our next webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.